Yeah, we're not doing any sort of intro or preamble today, we're just gonna get right into this. In March of last year, Pixar released the film Turning Red, a story about a teenage girl living in Toronto whose life takes a drastic turn when she discovers a condition inherited from her family that causes her to turn into a giant red panda whenever she experiences any sort of strong emotion. Sounds like an adorable story about adolescence with a lot of comedic potential while also having a strong emotional core, which is what Pixar does best. Which begs the question, why did so many people start behaving like this movie was the death of cinema? Well, other than it being changed from a theatrical release to a Disney Plus exclusive at the last minute. For a lot of, quite frankly, shallow and closed-minded reasons, there was a large number of people who despised this film's existence from the very first teaser trailer, labeling it as cringy, annoying, and perhaps most baffling of all, unrelatable. Now, as someone who loved this film and found it struck such a special chord with me in a way no other movie really has in terms of its storytelling and message, I of course took a issue with the massive backlash it received, which I view as overblown and severely misguided at best. And a year later, I haven't really come across any deeper discussion about the movie and why the filmmakers made the creative choices they did. So I figured what better place to finally start talking about Pixar on the channel than with a video describing why I love this movie so much that also seeks to demonstrate how many of the criticisms lobbied against it really don't hold much water upon a little further inspection. This is an analysis of Turning Red, Pixar's most relatable movie. Before we get into the trenches, why don't I tell you a little more what the film is actually about for those of you that haven't checked it out yet. And yes, this video will contain spoilers. The story centers around Mei-Lin Lee, a 13-year-old Chinese Canadian who lives in Toronto. She's a driven overachiever who always does her best in honouring her parents, even spending her evenings after school working at the family temple, where they give tours and educate people about their culture and family heritage, specifically their mystical connection to the red panda. This often comes at the expense of Mei getting to spend time with her best friends Miriam, Abby and Priya, who are obsessed with the popular boy band Four Town and desperately want to see them in concert. Soon, Mei finds herself starting to change, first discovering new feelings, then physically when she finds out she now unwillingly transforms into a giant red panda whenever she feels strong emotions. We learn this is actually something she inherited from her mother's side of the family, and the only way to stop it is to perform a ritual during the next lunar eclipse, just as all her relatives had done before her. But when Mei finds out the students at school love her adorable new trait, she recruits her friends to help her go behind her mother's back and market the panda so they can raise enough money to buy tickets for the upcoming Four Town concert. Throughout the story, Mei continues learning new things about herself and starts to question if the panda is truly something to be ashamed of and contained, or if she enjoys this new part of her, even if it could potentially change her relationship with her mom forever. And let's get this right out of the way, in this video I'm only going to be addressing the criticisms facing this film that actually warrant a deeper discussion. You know what I'm talking about. So let's start off with the namesake of this video. When Turning Red released, there was quite a number of reviews being published calling the film unrelatable, saying they couldn't connect with the characters. And that of course is going to be the one we're going to be talking about the most because there is a lot to unpack here. Turning Red at its core is a story that explores the journey of growing from adolescence to teenager in a way not many other stories are willing to discuss. Mei's arc is focused on learning more about her identity and changing into the person she wants to be. But it doesn't shy away from the hardships and how while you're growing up and learning more about yourself, the things you knew and the relationships you've had up until that point are going to change, and that can be utterly terrifying. The film goes through great lengths early in its runtime to show how strong the bond between Mei and Ming is and how much they enjoy spending time together. And by the end, there is a bittersweetness knowing that their relationship can never go back to that. Despite the fact the characters still deeply love each other, they both know the only way forward is to accept the change. That is what the opening line of the film telegraphs and is repeated at so many important moments. Her entire life, May has only ever honoured her parents, and her character arc is her realising that in order to be truly happy, she sometimes has to put herself first. And from my perspective, these themes and narrative are universally understandable. No matter who you are, as you grow up, the relationship with the adults in your life changes. And that change can manifest in many different ways and be anywhere from minuscule to drastic, but it still fundamentally alters the way you treat them and they treat you. Look at how Ming and her mother's relationship is used as a parallel to Mei and Ming's, acting as a potential worst case scenario of what could happen to them if they don't start trying to communicate with each other.
Your mother and I were close once, but the red panda took that away. I couldn't bear to see that happen to you.
Encanto obviously got the ball rolling with its themes and message of generational trauma and how to start repairing those fractured connections, which can't be overstated, but I feel Turning Red takes it a few steps further. It spotlights how Ming, in her efforts to not be like her mother, is making the same mistakes, not listening to her daughter or taking her feelings into consideration, which is creating circumstances similar to the event that caused Ming and Mei's grandmother's bond to be shattered. And I'm sorry, I just can't wrap my head around how anyone can look at this beautiful movie about discovering your identity and accepting change as part of growing up as unrelatable. But of course, there are two other elements of this movie which definitely contributed to this reaction. I'm not saying everyone who had this take falls into this box, but it's hard not to see the connection. This is a movie that celebrates Chinese culture and heritage. It is the featured directorial debut of Domi Shi, the first ever woman to direct a Pixar movie, might I add, who heavily based her movie on her life and her experiences growing up. And as so many at the time pointed out, the fact people consider the stories about sentient toys, bugs, fish, monsters, and robots more universal and relatable than this film was almost certainly somewhat racially motivated, especially when you had the anti-woke crowd propagating this view of the movie. The other big thing to address is this whole movie is a not at all subtle, gigantic allegory for puberty, specifically when a person first gets their period. Now, as someone who was assigned male at birth, I cannot speak with any authority on this topic, and neither does any cis man out there. To quote one of my favourite series currently airing, The Great North,
I think when women's issues are on the table, it's time for men to sit quietly down at that table and listen.
Fantastic show, by the way, check it out. The amount of people, again, mostly cis men, who were up in arms about this movie daring to mention and talk about the fact people get periods was absolutely ludicrous. Saying it makes the movie political and that it's inappropriate for children, despite the movie being PG, I want someone to properly articulate to me why a normal bodily function that a large portion of the population experiences is inherently political. Oh wait, the only people who feel this way are cis men, and just to remind you,
I think when women's issues are on the table, it's time for men to sit quietly down at that table and listen.
Seriously, give this show a watch. Video coming in December. I don't think I need to go any further why this is such a fundamentally wrong and blatantly misogynistic argument against the film. What I will say is I think the fact Turning Red openly addresses the topic and is able to joke about it but still in an earnest way is important, as it has the power to remove the stigma that unfortunately surrounds what is, once more for the people in the back, a normal thing a lot of folks experience, and let young people ask questions and feel more comfortable discussing it. Ah, what the heck, one more time. I love a good rule of three.
I think when women's issues are on the table, it's time for men to sit quietly down at that table and listen.
Okay, that got a bit heated. Let's recompose and move on to the next bit of the backlash, that being the people who found the film, specifically its humour and child characters, cringy and annoying. Obviously, this isn't something I'm able to objectively respond to, especially since what people find funny is all down to a matter of personal preference. And you can't say someone is wrong for not vibing with a certain tone or comedic style. I, for one, don't care at all for toilet humour, and more often than not roll my eyes when I see it pop up in films and shows, but more power to the people who do find that stuff funny. So this section isn't really a takedown of bad faith arguments targeted against the film, it's more so explaining why certain decisions were made to present the film like this, and why it's crucial in the grand scheme of things. May and her friends are 13-year-old girls living in 2002. They may technically be teenagers, but by and large, they are still kids. So of course they're a bit gross, obsessed, and yes, for lack of a better term, cringy, because that's how kids are. And you don't often see media brave enough to have these realistic child characters, which is doubly true when it comes to girls. I've made this point before, but we're sadly still in this age where girl characters in mainstream media being allowed to be goofy, loud, and yes, a little obnoxious, is revolutionary. And that is so important to this film in particular because of how it uses those moments to build the friendship between May, Miriam, Abby and Priya and show the camaraderie between them. They're just this group of best friends who are so unafraid to be themselves because they know they can always rely on each other. And that is another thing I adore about this film, how it presents May's friends as being such a huge part of her life. So many times in media we're bombarded with messages about how family and blood relatives should always be the most important to you, when in reality it's nowhere near that simple. Because especially at a young age, your friends and the people you choose to surround yourself with can be just as big a part of your life. They can help you grow and realize the person you want to be. Sure, the other girls often express their disappointment in May not being able to hang out with them and do encourage her to be more rebellious and put herself first, but at no point do they ever pressure her into doing anything she isn't comfortable with. They love and support her unconditionally without her feeling she has to earn it, which becomes a stabilizing presence in May's life. That is why the only way she is able to control the panda is by thinking of them.
We love you, May.
You're our girl.
Yeah, no matter what. Panda or no panda.
Truth be told, when I first saw the movie, I was expecting a scene where in a dramatic outburst, May would reveal to her mother that it was her friends she was thinking of in these moments. And I was initially disappointed that nothing like that happened, but upon further viewings, I understood it wasn't needed, because that's not what these scenes are meant for. They're not setting up a dramatic reveal, they're merely showing young people that it's okay to consider your friends a huge part of your life, as they can support you in ways the adults sometimes can't. And all that makes the scene where May stands by and lets them take the fall for everything all the more heartbreaking, because you feel for everyone in this moment. It's clear May's doing the wrong thing, but you completely understand the choice she makes, and she is instantly riddled with guilt, which is shown in the following scenes.
I've been obsessed with my mom's approval my whole life. I couldn't take losing it. But losing you guys feels even worse.
Side note, this shot of May in the car during the emotional low point, stunning. My favourite frame from any movie in 2022. This right here, now that's what I call cinema. And now we're going to talk about my favourite scene in the movie. The linchpin that holds this whole thing together and tells us exactly why the first 2 acts of the film needed to be written this way. While getting ready for the ritual, May's dad Jin, who until now has had a minor presence in the film, only speaking occasionally, stumbles across this silly little video May and her friends made while they were hustling the panda halfway through the movie. He then goes to see May and reveals to her the reason her mother and grandmother fell out was because of him.
Your grandma didn't approve of me, but you should have seen your mom. She was incredible.
And here is where the film's message is laid out for you point blank. Earlier in the film, once May has learned what she thinks is the full extent of what the panda means and is getting ready for bed, Jin says,
"Red is a lucky color."
And now we are finally given the full context of that moment.
People have all kinds of sides to them, May. And some sides are messy. The point isn't to push the bad stuff away, it's to make room for it. Live with it.
And that is why the movie had to be like this. Because a film whose core belief is about living your life as authentically as possible and accepting the parts of you that are messy or weird is the only way you can achieve that, would not have been as impactful if its characters and humour didn't embody that message. The issues the detractors have with those elements would make the film substantially worse were they not there, because it wouldn't be unashamedly itself, which is something people need to hear. Especially teenage girls, who society relentlessly ridicules for the things they enjoy or the way they act. That is why it is so important this movie was set in the early 2000s and is so heavily steeped in the pop culture from back then, with boy bands, Tamagotchi, the chibi look to everything. It's almost a sort of retribution, taking those childhood experiences back from the people who tried to make us feel ashamed about them. That is why a character like Tyler is so important, and how once he's revealed to be a fan of Four Town, the girls fully accept him with open arms and make him one of the group. And if this film made even one person less afraid to be themselves, then the world is automatically a better place for it. Cringe culture is dead, and I am about to tap dance on its grave. And that is also why I don't agree with the sentiment that the third act is the only part of the film worth watching. Because yes, while it's stellar, it's only as good as it is because of how all of this has been built up over the last hour. That point aside, I do want to talk about the film's ending because it was masterfully done. From May taking Jin's words to heart and keeping the panda, to Panda Ming and May's confrontation at the concert where May stands up to her. Then when all the other relatives break the seal, releasing their own pandas to help Ming, completing the ritual and sending them all to the astral plane, where May comes across the teenage version of her mother.
I hurt her. My mom. I'm just so sick of being perfect. I'm never gonna be good enough for her. Or anyone.
Once they reunite with the rest of the family, Ming and her mother reconcile as everyone accepts that it's May's life and her choice whether to keep the panda or not, as they all step through the portal, once more sealing their pandas. But when it's Ming's turn, she tries one more time to convince May to go with her. A final ditch attempt to make things go back to how they used to be, but both of them know even if May didn't keep the panda, things wouldn't simply revert.
I'm changing, Mom. I'm finally figuring out who I am. But I'm scared it'll take me away from you.
Me too.
I doubt this line would have hit me as hard as it did had it not been released while I was at uni, and even after a long time since I moved away, I still felt homesick and missed how close me and my parents were. See, it's moments like this that demonstrate what this film is trying to do, and what so many people seem to miss the point, whether subconsciously or purposefully. And others, particularly certain evangelicals, who try and claim the film is promoting disobedience by having the gall to suggest maybe sometimes it's okay to place a priority on your own happiness and not suppress yourselves in the futile attempts of maintaining others' approval.
You try to make everyone happy, but are so hard on yourself. And if I taught you that, I'm sorry. So don't hold back. For anyone.
And that's the note Turning Red leaves us on. These characters have been on a life-forming experience that has seemingly changed everything, and they're left to navigate these new situations and figure out how to keep moving forward. And again, I fail to see how that isn't something most people can relate to. Missing this chapter of your life that's over, yet still accepting the change and excitedly looking towards the future. I feel at this point I've kind of said my piece on this film. I adore it to death, and every single friend I've shown the film to falls in love with it all the same. It spoke to me in a way no other film has, and the vitriolic and cartoonishly exaggerated hate it received was not warranted at all. I really hope I've been able to convince some people who might have been turned off by this film to at least give it a chance.
We've all got a messy, loud, weird part of ourselves hidden away. And a lot of us never let it out. But I did. How about you?
When the fuck did these get so long? Despite how passionate I've been throughout this video, I hold no ill will towards anyone who genuinely tried this movie with an open mind and could not get into it. Nothing is for everyone, and so long as you're respectful and don't go looking for posts related to the movie only to trash it, then I have no issue with you not liking the film. I just wanted to gush about one of my favourite movies of the last year and explain why I find a lot of its detractors to be acting in bad faith, as well as discuss certain elements of the movie I haven't really seen get talked about much. Tell me down below your thoughts on Turning Red. Did you love it just as much as me, or was it really not your thing? So long as we keep things respectful, I'm happy to discuss it further. Until next time, I've been the Gladding Gladiator, and you'll remember to be unashamedly yourself and love every side of you. A huge thank you to the Beautiful Souls, The Wacky Deli, Zombie Rex, Torai Matson, Resplendent Nova, Oliver's Views and Shows, Blast6, Britt Von, Toon for Fort, Tom Pat, and Joseph Balash for supporting me over on Patreon. If you like what I do and want to help support the future of the channel, becoming a patron is the best way to do that. However, it's entirely optional, and I appreciate anyone who enjoys the stuff I put out there. Thanks so much for watching, folks, and I'll see ya real soon.